to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everybody. All right, I will take the roll. Janet Dykett. Present. Timothy West.
Present.
Kelly Hooper. Present. Joe Petrosky.
Here.
And I am also here. Any adjustments to the agenda?
None this evening.
None. Okay, then I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the Winthrop School Committee meeting on July 21st as written or with corrections. Second. Moved and seconded. Discussion.
Oh, it's back. The conversation. Tim is feeling relieved.
Oh, I'm sorry. Would you like to do it?
For a second.
Any questions or comments? I'll call the vote then. All those in favor? Vote passes unanimously. Superintendent's report.
I sent you my report, and you have that up. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have regarding that. And I did also want to add that since I sent that out, we have purchased a van, 12-passenger van, that will be, ultimately will be paid for out of special education funds on a local entitlement. But we're still in the market for 2 more 12-passenger vans. And ultimately, if we're successful doing that, I believe it will save us money over time, because what we pay Northeast Charter to take some of these small trips is ridiculous. And I don't blame them. I mean, it's sort of the standard rate, but what we can, by having our one, you don't have to have a bus driver's license and any special licensing, so we can take our small clubs and our small teams on trips, and at no additional cost to the school district. So I believe that will have a pretty fairly quick payback to us. So yeah, it's a 2019. It was purchased brand new by Goodwill Hinckley. So as a school, they took pretty good care of it. They traveled. They put a fair amount of miles. So it's got 28,000, which is not huge. We do not anticipate putting that kind of mileage on it, but it'll be nice.
What's the likelihood of getting the other 2 vans?
Well, I think as fall approaches, I think it'll be good. It's still overpriced for the market. We paid $39,000 for this one, and the place I was looking at in Lisbon, unfortunately, the owner just passed away. So they told me they couldn't sell us some last spring when we were looking at them, but they do a great rental business over the summer. Keeps most of their vans occupied, but he said come back and see him in the fall. His son was running the business, and I'll go back and see his son probably. We'll give him a little bit of time and then go back and see. So, but I do now have Charlie's looking for vans. I have Darling's, whatever they're called in Augusta, is also looking. That's where we bought this one. And then we have been in touch with Enterprise Rental, and they actually did identify 3 of them for us. They're out in California, so Megan and Colleen and I thought we'd road trip out to California. We could drive us back.
I'll take a vacation with that.
Yeah, fly out and drive back would be awesome. So, but that's it's more expensive, and they actually said they identified 3 vans for us, and then when we sort of pushed it, they had been sold to someone else. So the market is crazy right now in terms of people wanting to buy, particularly vans.
Yeah.
And that's what the guy in Lisbon told me. He said he couldn't sell us them because he can't replace them. Right. And the vans that are available are all being sold for retail, not for wholesale. So they just can't afford it. So, but we will eventually.
Awesome.
We'll keep looking.
Anything else for your report?
Yes. Actually, no. There's no appointments, resignations, retirements, or transfers.
Wow. So then I guess it's up to me next. Okay, so I have a few things. I was very fortunate to attend the 18 meeting on Tuesday at I just really appreciated being there. It's such a great group of professionals. They work really hard to the last detail. They work really well together. They are a bunch of doers. They just get things done. It's so impressive. So thank you for having me there. I really appreciate it. Dr. Shaw had his webinar. I don't know if any of you had a chance to see it.
Just clips, I haven't watched.
Just clips, okay. So ultimately, the bottom line is that at this point, any decision making is at the local level. And Nurse Melissa, I think she sent a link to everybody. You should have it in your email. If you don't, let me know. I can forward mine. If you want to be able to watch it, I think that she sent those out. So thank you, Nurse Melissa. And lastly, I think we all got an email from SBA about the proposed 2021 resolutions. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to see that yet. So that's something that they go over around their fall conference. They have a delegate assembly. And so next meeting, I would like to elect a delegate to send. Joe? Hopefully.
Been voluntold.
So we'll officially, we can officially pick that person next week. Okay, we can put it on the agenda. And that's all I have. Old business. Discussion regarding back to school considerations. Do you want to start or do you want me to start?
You can start.
Okay.
Did you skip committee report?
Oh, yeah, yeah, you
Oh, I
missed.
did. I'm
Sorry, I know, because you went down to your notes below.
I did, you're right.
I was like, oh.
Committee report, I thought that went kind of quick. Yeah, so committee reports, finance.
None.
For policy, all I have is that we will resume our meetings next meeting date, which is August 18th. So we will resume our policy committee meetings. Negotiations? None?
Everything's signed, sealed, and delivered, as far as I know.
Great. No ad hoc? Any ad hoc?
Yes, actually, I have something somewhat informal. I guess it makes sense if you want to keep E on there every agenda, but it's, I had a conversation with a really good friend of mine who, we have our mutual friend is a guy who works for Department of Education in construction. And I was all set to, I was going to reach out to Scott Brown. Well, I was going to reach out to this guy first of all, and then I was going to reach out to Scott Brown, who's in charge of that whole department. And I talked to my friend Rick Lyons, who's now the superintendent up in Holton. He was a long-time superintendent in Hampton. And we just got chatting, and I was telling him kind of what was going on. And he said that Holton Elementary School is 14th on the state list. And that he basically was telling the school committee that there's no way that building will be built within the next 10 years. And they're on the list, 14th. They will fund 5 projects this year. And I kind of knew all of this stuff, but it was sort of interesting to get some affirmation. And that it was more likely to be like 15 years before they build it. And they're on the list. I mean, I can't say that enough times. The list is not open. He had spoken with Scott Brown. They're not, as I shared with you before, the state is not accepting applications for new construction. So realistically, you know, anybody who thinks that we possibly could be looking at any sort of new grade school construction here in Winthrop in the next 20 to 25 years, it's just not going to happen. And I think it's not sort of fair to keep leaving it here and talking about it like it's doable. What is somewhat doable is there is money available, as it's pointed out in the draft document that was created by the architectural study last year. Is we're going to have to invest some money in that building. The sprinkler system, for instance. If you're not aware, the school in Frenchville by St. Agathe burned last week. And that was primarily because they don't have a sprinkler, didn't have a sprinkler. I didn't know you could operate a school in the state of Maine without a sprinkler system. Our sprinkler system is failing. We've made a huge investment in that building. This summer we put new siding on, the roof project is completed. So we probably all in all have put close to $500,000 into that building. And it was hard, you probably remember the conversations, it was a bit of a hard decision because it's, you know, I think there's sort of a sense of people think that that building's going away, and it's not. And then we continued that conversation by saying, while that building is not ideal in any way at all for particularly 3rd through 5th graders who were in that old high school wing, structurally, that building's not horrible. It's not a terrible building. It's not falling down. You know, I can't remember the word that people call the bones, as Joel kept saying last time. The bones are not bad. So even down the road beyond when my tenure as a superintendent has ended, and that building is still there, we get a new school. That building's still going to be viable for something, apartments, I mean, whatever. At that point, it'll be turned over to the town. But I guess I've been involved in enough of those building projects over the year that I look at that building compared to other places where I've been and what their issues are. We don't face them. We don't have a space issue. Space is the number one thing that gets schools ranked high on the list. There is not significant fire hazards. There's not a threat of mold and I know they tried to make issue of that with the architectural study, but there's really not, especially with the things that we've done, the investments we made, you know, to the O2 devices and such. So the things that typically get, you know, children out of the classroom. When I was at Cook, we get they get that brand new middle school. It's not so brand new anymore, but they were ranked very, very high on the list for the state for a new school, new middle school, because over 50% of the students were in portable classrooms outside of the school. We had zero. We had zero portables. So I just think it's people need to know that the greatest thing we can hope for here is maybe the community decides to, and the community's never going to support it either. I mean, that project at a very minimum for a brand new building is, we're talking about $30 to $40 million, probably more, but at a very minimum. We're not going to fund a $30 or $40 million project locally with just local monies. So maybe there's some incredible benefactor, we have a better shot of winning Powerball and building the school with that, or I'm sort of mostly joking, but I mean finding somebody who just wants to say, I want to build a new school and pony up the money. That's the only way I can foresee realistically that there'll be some sort of construction happening here. And that's, remember, we've talked about not necessarily a brand new construction. Maybe we move some grades around and we add something to the high school and something to the middle school, and maybe, you know, maybe we don't use that end of the building anymore. We just use this end of the building. While it isn't any more aesthetically perfect, it's at least appropriate for the students who, you know, the pre-K 2 students that are down there. It's a little more appropriate for it. So we could use a new library though, right, Teresa? Yeah. See? So anyway, I don't know what, you tell me what you want to do. We can leave it on there, but basically you're going to hear when we get to that none. Because there really isn't going to be anything to, I can tell you after I do reach Scott Brown, he gives us sort of the official, yeah, Jim knows what he's talking about kind of thing, and I can tell you that, and we can go from there.
I thought you were going to say that we should put that under the administrator's reports. For Joel.
For Joel. I like that idea. He can just keep us informed of what projects
Any
and
renovations.
Yeah, we'll do that.
I like that idea, Kelly.
So beyond the sprinkler system update, is there anything that you know off the top of your head that we should be looking at investing in for the grade school?
Well, we've done it. We've invested in new
Awesome.
siding, and that project ended up costing us more money because when we peeled the siding back and looked at the windows, and this is where Joel was talking about the bones. Thank God they used metal studs framing up the windows and such. So the T111, or I don't know if it was T111, that's in my own head. Whatever was underneath the siding was really rotting badly, and so we had to add additional money to shore up that, get it recaulked and all those types of things. And the roof was overdue for replacement, and it's now 100% replaced. So,
Is there any HVAC stuff that needs to be done there?
the HVAC stuff that needs to be done is really cost prohibitive, and it's really in the old wing, and that's why you remember last year we put the Aeris purifiers in there. They don't have the univents. They have the sort of old air exchange system, and so we couldn't put the O2 devices in there. But this, this building, it has, from the offices down, has univents and stuff like that. So, to put something in there, we talked about that way back in the beginning, putting roof units on, or even putting side units on, and creating the ductwork and things that you need to do. It's not practical to do that. But it's certainly not out of the question for us to think about. I think once we have sort of the definitive answer, which I'm 99.9% sure what that's going to be, then we could look at a small project loan. I think it's up to $2 million now. Maybe the community would be interested, would do that for looking at some sort of HVAC system for the grade school. As it stands now, I mean, God knows how long this will last, but the work that we did last year really worked well in terms of the fans and the AC. And the one place where we had an issue down in the music room, we did tap into the venting system, I guess, for lack of a better term. And so now we have a return, a cycle, airflow cycle there. So, and that's what I'm saying. That regardless of, we can't stay stagnant. We're going to have to invest, and those are the types of things we invest in.
Okay. Kelly, last meeting, Joel had a very comprehensive list of all the projects that he's compiling for us.
It was really eye-opening for all of us.
Yeah.
I was thinking, geez, you're going a little too deep, and then as you kept going, it's like, well, you're welcome to go look it up on the website.
I'm gonna have to.
Yeah, he's
But-
gonna put a list too.
I think he's going to
But
put it
he had
in
a
a
demonstrative team retreat,
priority list.
and it just really underscores something we need to share with the town council when we're putting our budgets together. To get all those things caught up, it's probably $300,000 price tag. And that's what happens. It's easy in communities to put off maintenance projects, and the cost never goes down.
Right, he spoke for a long time, and he just kind of ticked him off the list. That's quite the list.
Can I ask a question, just so I don't forget it? It's sort of on the same topic. So with our air systems that are in our schools, because this may come up later anyways,
Yeah.
do those get tested periodically? Like,
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know how that works.
We have a contract with Siemens, and they
Okay,
come
so
in.
they come in and do air quality tests. I
They
figured
do.
they did, but I
They
just
do.
wanted to be sure.
And one of the things that's still on the list, I don't know that it'll be worth it. I've continued to have conversations with Siemens about doing what's called a performance contract. And they still, I mean, there's, as you can imagine, they're crazy busy now with all the stuff from COVID. And the guy who does it and did it for me when I was over in RSU4 said, yeah, we'll get to it. He's been out once and walked around the buildings with the custodians, and it may seem a little crazy, but I mean the high school is prime for a performance contract, and so is the middle school. They're still would be considered fairly newer buildings, but they're older, so that and they will look at every aspect from controls to lights to the building envelope to windows, everything, and give us an estimate. And remember that whole theory is based upon that whole practice is based upon. They would look at the savings you would realize from making those investments at no cost, a guaranteed no cost to the community. So as I shared with you before, in RSU4, we had $2 million worth of work done, including a new pellet boiler at Oak Hill High School at no cost to the taxpayers. And it's all real. I mean, we pay them, but like I said, if you get $200,000 of operations maintenance cost, and your performance contract promises you it's $200,000 savings, don't hold me to that number, it's just making that up. Then if it's $201,000, they pay that $1,000. You're limited, you're capped. And we asked them, we did 3 bidders for that, and we asked them, how many times have we had to pay because you didn't estimate? And the answer, all 3 of them, 0. Never happens. So they're very conservative in their estimates. So.
Nice. Okay, there are no administrators' reports tonight, so now we will turn to Megan White, Director of Teaching and Learning. And she's going to go over annual ESAE project summary and the American Rescue Plan and secondary school emergency use.
No, so I think there is a minor error. It should be ESEA.
Oh, ESEA.
So it's, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act.
Okay.
So this is our title funds that we receive annually, and so I present to you folks annually what our district and building-wide projects are, so that you're aware and I can answer any questions for you, and allow the public to kind of be informed on what we use some of our grant monies for. And so there is kind of a summary sheet in your packet. It's also online with our agenda. So we'll start kind of looking at our total allotment for this year. So if you kind of head to the bottom of that sheet, we have $226,000, and I do want to report that's down around $27,000 from last year. And kind of the not great news about this is that it is based somewhat on our enrollment and our student needs. And so we're hoping to kind of regain some of that footing. But over the last 4 years, we've had a little bit of a downward trend in our funding allotment from the state. Our Title V money specifically did go up, but when I reached out to them around that, they said that it will be decreasing just a little bit too as we move forward. So that's kind of the not great news. The great news is that we're able to fully fund all of the programs that we ran last year. So there's actually not a big shift in any of the projects this year. We're going to be able to support all of those with our grant money. So our district projects, our homeless foster care project is always funded by Title I. That's our homeless liaison. It involves a stipend, the stipend costs, and then it also provides some money for supplies for students who are identified as needing some additional supports that we can provide through the school. Another district project kind of focuses around, again, our Title V piece, which is professional evaluation, professional growth, professional development of our staff. So improving our teachers, which will then improve the education for our students. And this year, again, it's very similar to what it's been for the last couple of years. We have our eye observation license. We actually contract with a consultant who's kind of a Marzano guru and works closely with eye observation, which is kind of the school bus for our feedback. So as administrators are providing feedback to our teachers and teachers are setting goals, that's the moving modality for it. So it's an online program. This also covers our Western Maine Educational Collaborative dues, which is a professional community that we're part of with other schools in the Western Maine area. And they provide different professional opportunities for our teachers that we can share. It also, a big thing that they spearheaded last year is expanding their professional groups. So having guidance counselors from all of Western Maine get together and collaborate. Principals, encouraging them and setting a monthly time where they get together and collaborate. And the feedback from those groups has been really positive, especially as we went through kind of the COVID piece last year. How are they handling, if there were 2 guidance counselor groups, how are we handling graduation requirements? How are we handling college visits? All of those things could be workshopped collaboratively. So being part of that group is something that continues to pay dividends, I think, as far as those professional conversations. This amount is down from previously. Some of this supports my salary, the Director of Teaching and Learning, as I help to improve our teaching and learning practices for our teachers and involve some data analysis in our district goals. So those are our district-wide projects. Those are things that impact students across our district. Then more specifically, which most people are aware of, is that we have a Learning Lab Title 1A program that's run through our grade school. And that takes up nearly all of our allocations. We transfer money into that every year to make sure that we're supporting that. We have 1 teacher in there. They're a teacher leader, and they oversee the work of 2 ed techs. Last year we had 2 ed techs also, but the second one we couldn't hire until partway through the year. So that created, when I said that we're in good shape this year, that created that little bit of cushion. So when we had that 27 deficit, we were able to have carryover from the previous year to help support that program. So I'm pretty excited about being able to do that. We also have a family involvement team that does activities. Last year they held virtual ones, and they also did some asynchronous activities that our Title I students took home to do with their families and then report back to their teachers. So some fun, engaging pieces, because the more our families are involved in their struggling learners' education, the more support they have, kind of complete that triangle. Then the last piece is that our Learning Lab continues, or this grade school project continues to fund our Star Plus, which is our summer school program that happens here at Winthrop Grade School. And so this will fund next summer's program.
I have a question, Megan.
Yeah.
As obviously you're aware, with school lunch being free next year for all students, a lot of money is tied to free and reduced lunch. Has the state figured out anything?
So they've actually been rolling out kind of a PR piece. I don't know if you've seen on social media. They put a couple, the DOE put out a couple notifications to encourage families to sign up. We have some additional paperwork, I think, on our website right now, trying to encourage families. And I can also tell you that Chef Aaron, last week, he sent out a mailing to all families in the district to fill out that paperwork. Because last year we didn't get the returns as families. No, it's going out this week. She prepared it last week. It's going out this week. And we spoke a little bit about that in 18 retreat today. That's why I'm 100% positive about that one. So we are doing some stuff to try to encourage families to fill out that paperwork. We also talked a little bit about, is there a possibility that we could incorporate it onto our website? I don't remember exactly what the modality is for our athletics, but can we have that be a digital form that parents and families can access online, since there is some sensitive information that we're asking for. That's part of the application for free and reduced. So can we make that available digitally for them also? And I think Joel and Aaron are going to collaborate on trying to make that for all three buildings. So locally we're doing something, and I think at the state level they're also trying to push that PR piece, because they know the impact. I mean, it impacts our technology, it impacts this funding, it impacts just our overall, allotments. So yes, for sure.
I have a question. Go ahead, you go first.
Well, I'm just pleased she brought this up, because I find what they're talking about totally confusing. From the standpoint of Janice just said that they are saying they're going to provide lunch and breakfast to everybody. But then there is a catch. There's something, why do they want us to sign up if they've already said they're going to give it free?
But because we still have to keep track of our rates for eligibility for, whatever, you have to quit, it's called, but Mike,
E-rate?
E-rate, thank you. For the E-rate, and if people don't, then at some point they're not going to fund it all, and so we need to be able to have that data to support what we know and what we have. So if nobody fills out the paperwork, we don't know what our rates are for free and reduced lunch, so our E-rate is going to be damaged. I mean, Mike was talking about the possibility of losing up to $100,000 of E-rate monies because people aren't filling out that form. So
and that's similar data is used.
But what you just said there is that E-rate depends upon that data. Even though it's not food, it still depends upon the data. That word has to get out.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right, but we've tried to do
Every school
that.
district, it has to get out.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I agree with
Yeah.
that. That's why I'm saying, what can we do besides posting it or?
Well, Aaron, what Megan was talking about is Aaron has sent out the letters, and she has the form that's sent out with it. She sent a self-addressed envelope to every parent, so they can fill it out and send it back to us. They can fill it out electronically online. We tried to share some information in that letter about why it's still important and necessary for people to let us determine what the eligibility is, because it does impact funding for our school system. So I don't know what more we can do other than to make it a bit to provide the information.
Joe, I'm sending you an email that has the language for the bill about this that talks talks about what percentage need to return and need to be eligible for the school lunch, even though the state is offered to do it. So it kind of explains the answer to your question.
That's good. I was just thinking of groups that are out there, that the leaders of those groups could help us get this information too, by talking to their clients. You can't figure out all that, okay, that's what it meant. I mean, I don't know.
Like our PTA, is that?
No, I
Oh.
really, you know, there's no secret about it. I mean, I have a son that receives services, okay? He's not in school, he's not of school age or anything, but there are others. Well, I guess this whole group is all young adults, okay, but there are others, he was in those programs before he got there.
Right.
And I'm saying, I've never ever heard them talk to parents or to send home something to us that would make us aware of what's going on and why it's a good idea if we participate in signing up for it.
So even if we harness just the daycare providers in town.
Daycare providers could be political.
I have a question in regards to the funding going down by 27,000.
Mhm.
Was that because of the increased number of homeschool kids?
I don't think it
or-
has to do with our overall enrollment.
Oh, it
Part of
doesn't.
what I have to report in my application every year, as I'm kind of learning this, is that I actually have to report free and reduced data as part of
Okay.
mine too. So there is some ties to that. But there's also some additional clauses this year to try to protect districts from some of the other issues, to help us maintain some of this funding. We've had a downward trend. 2 years ago, it was around 7,000. From 2020 to 2021, it was almost 12,000.
Okay.
So some of it is state funding, and they honestly get the funds federally, and so they have an idea of what the trends are going to be.
And that is 100% where the issue is. It's the simplest way to explain it is that the pie that we keep getting, the pie pool of money that we keep getting from the federal government keeps going down. That's happening. Maine's not unique in that. That's less and less money from federal programs, and so we're probably getting proportionally the same share that we've always got, but it's a same percentage of a smaller pie.
So that's something we need to keep in mind for pledge.
Yeah,
And then
but you know, the funny thing, it's not funny. I've done this job long enough to see it go like this. So, you know, there was a time when people were saying, I remember, 10, 12 years ago, people saying, well, in a few years we're going to have 0 federal funds. And then they shuffled them. It used to be different types of title programs. They'd merge them together, and all of a sudden there's an election, different group of people get in there, and there's more federal funds. And then you start getting more money, and then it starts going away. And so, I don't know. I would say it's too early to panic, but it's certainly worthwhile. And Megan's doing it. She's watching it.
And actually, FY 18 to 19, we had gone up by about 17,000. So, as Superintendent Hodgkin is saying, there is some ebb and flow to it. So, although we've had a couple of years where it's gone down, and this year is a little bit more significant, that there are years where it's gone up. And I don't have data about the past.
No,
20.
that's fine. I just wanted to know what was driving it going down.
Yeah, no, great question.
If it's something that's going to continue in the future. That's the only question I have.
If there's no more questions on the ESSA, then I'd like to move to the ESSER. And so this is the American Rescue Plan ESSER money that we've been hearing that we had, a very significant amount allotted to our district, so we're super excited. And one of the caveats, which I don't think it is at all to start off, is that a minimum of 20% of this has to be applied directly to student services. And the A team, when we first met, even before we had this 20% kind of threshold that we had to meet, had decided that essentially every project we were going to fund with this was going to be focused on student supports. And so, although the minimum's 20, we're really rocking about 100% of this grant going directly to servicing our students and helping support our teachers. We've invested lots of other ways with our federal money to make our buildings super duper safe. We've looked at our air quality, we've looked at sanitation and cleaning, and as we move into next year, we really want to make sure we're investing in our students. So We kind of took a three-prong approach. We were looking at our student needs as being academic, and then social, and then kind of emotional, okay? In addition to having some out of the traditional school year components too. And so it kind of walks down each of those as we look at this. Again, this sheet is also available online. Underneath our COVID-19 information, you can access this also. All of our grant programs are now on the website also with the projects aligned to them. So right there we have, so I'm going to use the acronym CIS, which stands for COVID Impact Services, because there's many impacts because of COVID. So when I say a CIS teacher, I'm talking about a COVID impact teacher. So we're hiring 3 to 4 teachers to support students, so certified teachers, who are going to be providing high quality tutoring for identified students next year and the following year. So we'll have at least one person in each building who are going to look at data streams and identify kids and move them in and out of high impact tutoring programs.
Will that be during the school day or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, yep. So these folks will be working during the school day and working collaboratively with teachers and students alike. So we've already started structuring some of their schedules around when study halls are happening. And at the grade school, we're trying not to overlap some additional services. And there's been discussions with special education also. This has been an incredibly collaborative process. So we're presenting you the cream for sure. The next piece, so this money also is going to include supplies for those teachers and additional assessment materials so that we're not borrowing from our current buildings. So we're looking at adding extra Fontness Pinnell sets. We already have a math diagnostic that we're looking at getting involved with at the grade school. We're going to be expanding that program too. So this also supports that program almost entirely. The next piece is our CIS, our COVID Impact Services Social Emotional component. And we added an additional grade school counselor. And we also added a district-wide social worker. So we did have our previous social worker retired this year, Lita Blanchard. And so we kind of had a hole there anyways, but we really realized that we want students to be able to have access to another social worker as needed. And honestly, it's a resource for our teachers to reach out to too, as they look into supporting students in that aspect, and that will fund both of those positions for 2 years.
Have we hired that social worker?
So I am excited to say that the teachers and the social worker and counselor we have already hired. So I'm very excited about our staff. Our teachers are teachers that were already teaching in district who transitioned to this position, and they are jazzed, really excited to be trying and really focusing on individual students, knowing that it's a 2-year position. And maybe it will grow into more, maybe it will not, but really excited that they're going to have 2 years to really focus on this, and they're going to not have to worry about it being consistent. Similarly, we have hired that grade school counselor. I feel like we have approved him through, yeah, we must have approved him through
Mr. Ladd.
Mr. Ladd?
Yes.
So he's our additional
So we now
counselor.
officially refer to him as the rookie.
Yeah. And then Lori Foster is our 2-year social worker that's working district-wide also. So that kind of takes those 2 pieces. Then talking to leadership, talking to our back to school committee, there are some other needs that will potentially happen in the building based on our plans coming back next year. So these are not COVID techs. They are not intended like COVID techs were last year. They are not just cleaning. So these are Ed Tech 2s. So their responsibilities will be a little different, and there'll be one in each building. So they can support teachers in the classroom, out of the classroom. They might help with managing students while they're doing assessments, the potential for helping out with teacher absences and pieces like that. So we have these COVID techs, not COVID techs, these CIS ed techs now that are fulfilling that role to support our buildings. And so you can see all of these really are feeding into supporting our teachers and supporting our students. So then we have CUS Brain for the first time this year. That was funded by ESSER 1, which is also called the CARES Act. Super successful. I know Mr. Campbell and Ms. Pilot will be excited to talk about the numbers of students attending that, as I am too, but I won't steal their thunder for their admin reports right now. But that was very successful, so we're looking at running that again for the next 2 years, and that will be funded through our ARP ESSER grant. Very excited about that. And then the last piece, which might feel like, is this really a COVID-related piece? Well, we need to make sure that our classroom sizes are staying reasonable. And we have a very large group moving into the middle school, 5th to 6th. And to keep those class sizes as appropriate as possible, we are adding a math science position. So currently our middle school teachers all teach one content area. This person we're looking at hiring will be covering math and science for one of our core classes that have a high enrollment in the middle school level right now.
Because the 7th grade is also a good sized class, right?
Yeah, the 8th grade that left, do you mean this current 7th or?
Going into 7th.
Going into
The
7th,
6th
yes,
into
yeah,
7th.
6th going into 7th was very large last year also.
Is the 5th going into 6 also large?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
yes, they are. Yep, so we have 2 pretty large classes. We did graduate a reasonably large class,
Yes.
but it's still not making the difference, especially as we think about class sizes moving into next year.
Yeah, yeah, great.
So, so all of those over a 2-year span, so we're looking at all of these positions being 2-year positions and being able to fund them entirely with our American Rescue Plan ESSER grant.
Awesome. I have a quick question in regards to the ed techs. You said teacher absences, so that could alleviate some of the problems with.
So we're still hoping to
Subs.
hire substitute teachers, or not hire, but, you know, well, I guess it is, right?
Yeah.
Have substitute teachers coming into the buildings, but there are emergency situations
Right.
that do occur, and often teachers will step up. We
Yeah.
know that, right? Our
Right.
teachers will step up and fill that role.
Have a class.
And so,
Yes.
if we
This
can
is a-
alleviate the amount of that happening in our buildings, then we're not impacting 2 classrooms.
That's great.
We're only impacting the one where the teachers potentially absent.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions?
Just so everyone knows, both of these are out for public comment until the 18th. And there's forms online, or anyone can reach out to me. My information is on the sheet. My extension also is 4040 if you're calling the middle school. So I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you for all of this.
Yeah.
This is awesome, Megan. Have you had any comment yet?
No, so I've actually had it all live since July 1st. Just kind of feeling things out and seeing if I do get anything. I added forms, which isn't traditionally how we've gathered public comment. It's usually done through this.
Yeah.
And then they reach out, and so I wanted to include both.
Yeah.
So it will say public comment is open through this date, and then I actually said I reopened it for this meeting because I didn't want to deter the community since they weren't used to it being a Google form online.
Awesome. Thank you, Megan. Now I can turn the page.
Now,
I gotta start writing notes at the bottom. It messes me right up. Okay, so now we're at old business, discussion regarding back to school considerations.
Good?
Now I can go. Okay. So, after the webinar with Dr. Shaw, basically saying that, at this point, and he did say, it can change any minute, that decisions can be made at the local level. So in the 18 retreat, there was a lot of discussion around this. So I'm just going to read a rough draft of what the 18 came up with. 5 days school week, no remote option, mask on buses, which is federally mandated, mask optional in buildings. During the school hours, visitors will not be permitted in the building whether or not they're vaccinated due to trying to keep our cohorts pristine. Vaccinated vendors are permitted during the school days. After-school clubs and activities will be permitted to come into the buildings. Social distancing will not happen on buses.
Use.
So, just do this one, right? And this one.
Oh, okay. I have a different order.
You have a different order. Oh, okay, well, maybe you have more than me. Sports will continue as usual. Social distancing is not mandatory. They're looking to have open houses in the schools, like they used to in the past. That will be permitted. encourage self-screening in the mornings, like as in last year when families would self-screen. Students that are symptomatic will be seen by a nurse. There will still be an isolation quarantine room, and they will need a negative test to come back. Close contacts. So right now, I believe if you have been vaccinated and you're considered a close contact, you do not need to quarantine. If you are not vaccinated and you're considered a close contact, you can take a test, and if it comes back negative, you can come back to school. And like I said earlier, this is all subject to change depending on the CDC and the DOE recommendations and guidelines, and also if transmission rates rise in Winthrop. If that happens, then we'll tighten up our mask expectations and building use rules.
A question on close contact.
Yes.
So what is the actual role going to be in the sense of a student enters a classroom for 2 minutes? So
Yeah.
often it seems like the same person enters the whole classroom that quarantined.
So we have a little more flexibility this year to take a look at that. And we would have the student who's symptomatic go to the nurse and go to the quarantine room. And based on the conversation the other day, I think that our recommendation would be that not everybody needs to quarantine. So in a little more history with that, and this was a big part of our conversation. I mean, what Sue just summarized for you was probably an hour and a half, 2 hour, it was a long conversation. So it starts with a sort of a recognition of the investments that we've made here in Winthrop in our schools. And the research that was attached to the decision that we made around putting in the O2 devices in our ventilators, not ventilators. we do not have ventilators in the classroom, just want you to know. Air exchange systems. And that, at least according to the research, our classrooms are virus free. So, and viruses that exist or are introduced into our classrooms are killed with this device. So why would we, I mean, what is the point of making that investment if we don't then use that as a way to conduct school in as least disruptive a situation as possible? So that just leads me, I mean, nobody asked that specific question, but it just, if I'm following the logic of the group's conversation, I think they would say exactly that. Anybody that we suspect, anybody that's symptomatic is removed, and then is isolated, and we kind of have to go from there. We have, unlike last year, and I know kind of where you're coming from, unlike last year, it was
Just sometimes random.
we were just told that we had zero flexibility. One of the things that was a little bit weird, again, if you haven't seen the thing with Dr. Shaw, it wasn't just Dr. Shaw, it was two or three other people too. And it really, and I'm sitting there thinking, oh my God, we're gonna have to do this, we're gonna have to do that. And then at the end, he was asked directly, are these requirements or recommendations? And that's what Sue sort of led with. He was, no, these are all recommendations from the CDC, from the federal CDC, from the Maine CDC, from the DOE, and that ultimately it's a local decision around all this. So we have a great deal more flexibility this year.
I have a question. And you're going to look at me and say, I think we talked about this before. The virus-free device is included in the 3 through 5 thing?
Well, no, but in there, because they don't have the filtration system, there's a Univent, here we go, thing. They don't have the Univents there, that's what I'm saying, it's older. That's why in each of those classrooms they have another device that the stuff that came with it is called ARIS.
Okay.
ARIS filtration system, and it essentially claims to do the same thing.
Okay.
And we put additional venting systems in there to keep fresh air coming in. That's what I talked about earlier with the fans, window fans, and the air conditioners.
Okay.
So, they,
Go ahead, sorry.
I'm just saying that, you know, we're being told that that is essentially the same thing.
Is all down here the same system, like town offices, your offices, all of those?
No, no. No, all of the school, this area isn't either.
Okay.
But all of this, you know, from when you go up the stairs and you enter into the building, that's all the classrooms are 100%. That's why, if you may recall, we did talk about this before, but we can never talk about this too much. It's the virtual possibility. The hallways, I mean, we can say that based on what we believe, you know, the research says for the devices that were put in place, that our classrooms are essentially or virtually virus-free. So it really begs the question about why we need to take some of the steps that were being recommended last year. But we can't say that with the same level of certainty for the hallways. We can for the gym, because we have 4 of those Aeris devices now. We can for the cafeteria, which has a unit vent that has these devices in place. So it isn't just any space. It isn't. There are other places other than the classrooms that have the devices in place.
Okay.
So that's why one of the recommendations, I mean, personally, we'll see. We're going to have the conversation tonight, and you guys are going to vote on this next meeting. But you know, for me personally, it's going to. I'd like to write, and I want to get stuff in out to the public as soon as possible, even after tonight. I'm still going to recommend. We talk about a choice. Masking is a choice. I don't want people to feel like they shouldn't mask or they can't mask. I think they can mask, and I think they can mask, and they should feel comfortable doing that, and they should feel comfortable taking their masks off more often, and you know, whatever. And I want to encourage staff, students, you know, everybody. And at one point I said, when I'm visiting schools, I probably would mask, and then the principals were like, well, if you will always mask, then people will feel like there's pressure to do that. I said, okay, I'll think about that. I'm just trying to say that we got so, I don't know, we just masked pretty comfortably last year. I think that the concern about the restrictions on mask breaks and that it was really discouraged to sort of take the masks off. I think that's not the case anymore. And I think we tried to say that a little bit last year with the DOE and never got any good response from them or CDC. And we got a little more, you know, a little more of a sense to say. I asked Megan, actually, I wasn't able to get on to the meeting, but Megan pirated it for us. Put me and Mark and Jeannie Ross on. We were on live, but live just in terms of seeing it. But I couldn't ask questions, so I couldn't interact. So there were 500. So apparently, I didn't know this. New learning.
Yeah.
The count was 500. So they were over 500. But so it was Megan plus 4 others. So there's 5 more there. But she could ask the question. I asked her to ask the question. I've been not getting an answer to the entire year. We made this investment. We have this O2. We have the research that suggests that provides an element of safety and some comfort for us in terms of not spreading and all those types of things. And we went the entire year, like every other school in the state of Maine, with 0 episodes of spread in school. And shouldn't we get some consideration for that? And the answer was, those are good things. There was still not a real good answer, but it was kind of like those are good and those should be considered, or that type of thing. Did you have the actual wording?
I don't have the exact wording, but part of the ARP, American Rescue Plan grant, is now investments in air filtration is something that you can choose to apply some of your funding for. So reading that really instilled that we made some, and they say improving air quality too, which is part of some of our other projects. I just feel like we've already made some great investments that now are coming out as suggestions to use some of our grant funding. So it's nice to say we have that.
There's something else related to that. Oh, part of the, for those who got to see it, it felt a little bit like a bit of a commercial, just to encourage pool testing. And you know, it was really great to have Jeannie and Melissa be a part of this last year, and then the administrators, and really be on board with this. That what they're suggesting, I don't understand why pool testing makes any sense at all. In essence, bottom line, with pool testing, if you have students who test, or somebody tests positive in that pool, then the others have to test to see it, and if they test negative, they can stay in school. If they're asymptomatic and they test negative, did I say positive? If they test negative.
No, I was just gonna say they have to have, after the pool test, they'd have to have the individual test.
So, which is essentially what we're saying anyway. We'll have the nurses address students who are symptomatic, and then we will have them tested, and we will go. And that, I guess that's to me, that's the biggest difference between now and before. Last year, you couldn't test your way back in. You had to do the whole quarantine period, and now we're saying no. You don't need to do the whole quarantine period.
Will the nurses have tests available?
Yes, they do. They already have them. Yeah.
Also, if someone's, like, my other question was common cold. You know, they have to go to the nurses, so she has a test right there that she can give.
She does. I don't know if it's common cold that they will actually, that's once, that usually has one or maybe two symptoms. I think they would do a more comprehensive check.
I know, like before, I was like, my kids didn't even have a sniffle, so there's
Yeah.
mess around. You know what I mean?
I thought the nurses did a really good job kind of fleshing out the regular.
Yeah, they did.
Six
Our nurses are pretty hyper vigilant, so I'm very confident in them. I think the gentleman had a question.
Yes.
Just as far as the tests go,
Yeah.
you are talking about the rapid tests, not the PCRs?
The rapid test initially, that is correct.
Okay. In the event that you get a false positive for a rapid, can you get a PCR, and if that comes back negative, have that trump the rapid?
Yes.
Okay. Also, what about previous exposure, previous infection? Is that no consideration whatsoever?
COVID infection?
In what way?
Having previously had COVID?
It is to the extent
Yeah.
that the profession already, the medical profession already recognizes that the antibodies that are created by that exist. So all of those, they're all factors.
But does that mean that if there was a previous infection, that exposure means you can come back?
That to me, and we haven't talked about that specifically, but
Yeah,
it's
it's a good
logically
question.
based upon our conversation, they would be treated as a vaccinated individual.
Thank you.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Thank you for that question.
What's the, I'm sorry, what was the word on spacing? Do we still have?
None.
None?
None.
None, even in the lunchroom.
Teachers don't have to space.
Even in
Students
the
don't have to
lunchroom.
space. In fact, we're going back to lunch tables this year, Teresa.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Timothy.
The YMCA for the Winthrop youth, younger kids, is that a different, are they following the school plan, or do they have to follow?
They follow their own
Just a
community.
little bit different?
Yeah, that's different.
This question.
Now, is there even anything out for the community stuff this year?
Well, the last I knew, it was like everything's gone away, but I might, obviously if you don't know this, and I think all of you do at this point, this is, some people who are looking at, and the recommendations from the federal CDC and the DOE, the guidelines, are based upon concern about the increase in the Delta variant. So it's very real. I think we have to pay attention to it and see what's happening. That's why we talked about what do we do if if our numbers increase in the county and they change that, it goes from instead of a guideline is now a requirement. So we need to be prepared to do that, and that's a little bit challenging for us because as things stand right now and the way we've allocated our ESSER funds, we are not able to kind of go back to what we did last year. We're sort of committed to the 5-day-a-week no remote learning option because we don't have funding to do anything but that. And our hope is that as the research goes on and the science comes up with this or that or whatever the case may be, I still would maintain that our schools will be the very safest. Our schools, I can only speak for Winthrop, will be the very safest place that people can be. And we made the decision to not allow, to maintain no visitors during the day, because we try not to mix the cohorts. And this is another thing that we kind of learned from last year. People might say, well, why are you allowing groups in after school? Groups in after school, they make their own choice to come in and use our buildings, and then say, well, what do you have? You have potential exposure to the virus. Well, first of all, our building is less likely to spread that. But even if that were the case, what we learned, what was one of the myths from last year was this whole notion of when schools were closed on Wednesdays in other districts for deep cleaning. Well, as you know, we never bought into that notion, because we know that without a host of some sort, the virus will die in a relatively short time. And so, hypothetically speaking, even if we talked about basketball games ended at 10 o'clock at night, and everybody was out of the building at 10 o'clock at night. Nobody occupies that building from 10 o'clock at night till 6 o'clock the next morning. Realistically, it's more like 7 o'clock the next day. That's a 9-hour window. The virus does not survive 9 hours without some sort of host reject. Yeah. So, I used to say jokingly, but not obviously none of it's really a joke. But if we really want to do deep cleaning during the day, then we just take our kids outside for an hour. Take everybody outside, leave the building, come back in. The building is virus free.
And that's even without all of our filtration.
Right. Exactly.
Just revisiting the question about prior exposure, how will you work with the nurses on confirming that there's been prior exposure instead of a kid coming in and saying, well, I had it last year? Is there some kind of...
Well, we know every kid, it's actually harder for the adults than it is for the children. We have to report. Okay. Anybody who tests positive, we know that. Okay. Confidentially. So we don't report that in terms of, we don't say names and stuff like that. That would be one of the rare FERPA HIPAA violations. It usually mix. So we know that. We know who has had it. And we also know when they've had it. So if you think about that, if they're not vaccinated, they have antibodies from having survived, and having had COVID.
Would you have that for kids who move in district from other districts as well?
In district, other districts, probably not.
So what I was gonna add to that, if that were a case and I were a parent and had a kid, I would make sure if it came back positive, you would say, look, they had COVID this summer or something, you know what I mean? Like, I would assume parents would want their kids in school, so they would give access to that information. All it sometimes takes is, yes, you can talk about my child or whatever, you know what I mean, that kind of thing. But I hope parents would be forthcoming with that.
So the other thing related to that, and we should have written it down, is part of Dr. Shaw's presentation was that there's new reporting for staff and students on a monthly basis to the CDC to kind of keep track of those types of things. Not who, but what percentage of students have had it. We'll know who the individuals are. We're not reporting by individuals, we're reporting by percentages. X percentage of your adults, have had COVID or have coronavirus, X percentage of your students, and obviously we're going to continue to watch. All schools will continue to watch for. There's so many pieces to it, but it's about not only having it, but determining where it came from. And that's why I said that, 0 schools spread through. When we had the issues last year, they were all from the community. So one suspected on the bus last year. Suspected. Sorry, I don't want to run your meeting.
Oh, no, that's okay. Yes.
I have an incoming kindergarten student who's from pre-K, and when I think about the number of small little humans who are all unvaccinated with no spacing and no mask, it feels to me like we're overcorrecting and trying to jump back to normal. What level do you decide, okay, now we're going to institute masks, now we're going to institute spacing, and how do you make that decision when it's not already too late and you're facing these parents who have kids now that are in quarantine it's been a long year for parents and having to juggle jobs and daycare and quarantine periods and childcare, and I fear that we're going a little too far maybe and being too optimistic and not having enough safeguards. Where's the middle ground there? And masks seem like it would be maybe a middle ground if you're stripping social distancing, or if you're stripping masks, have social distancing. But to take it all away, we're not going to know. I mean, it's been documented over and over that there's a problem until there's already a problem. And that's just what my fear as a parent is. I'm a pharmacist. I've given a lot of COVID shots, done a lot of work, and I know I'm extra sensitive to regulations and recommendations, but I run our business by trusting what the expert recommendations are. And so it feels a little bit to me like an overcorrection as a parent here.
Can I add? So I don't teach in this district, I teach in Windsor. We as teachers learned a lot last year about germs, spreading, things like that. I would be shocked. I still don't think it's going to be a normal school year. We have sanitizers all in our rooms that we never had before. Hand washing has become more routine, I think, in most classrooms than it has before. And social distancing, I mean, even though, and again, I can't speak for every teacher everywhere, but I know in my classroom, I'm still going to be cognizant of that. I think if cases are high in the Winthrop area.
So what's high, I guess, is like what would make, I think, some parents feel better? Is it the first case, then we start masking?
No,
Is it there's substantial or high? Like that's, I think,
Yeah, that's a good
where.
question.
It's a great question, but I think I think we're going to rely. We met weekly as a group of superintendents in the Kennebec Valley area. We plan to do the same thing this year. So we have members of the DOE, Maine School Management, and we invite other people to join us. And we actually, there's an emergency meeting, not emergency, because of all of these changes. We had scheduled our meeting for just before school started, but with all these changes and wanting to get a sense of what's going on in the regionally, they're meeting tomorrow. It's not an emergency meeting. That sounds more.
Special meeting.
Sounds worse. A special meeting. There you go. And because it's such a special meeting, I'm not able to attend because I have a doctor's appointment. A very special person, Megan, is going to attend on my behalf to do that. So, is it going to be I don't know. I don't think we know.
Well, maybe there. I am like all for like I've been vaccinated. I'm not wearing a mask. I think people who have been vaccinated have told me like I don't think the masks are there. It's my fear is when you have just by definition grade schools entirely unvaccinated because of the age range.
Absolutely.
It feels a little.
So can I just go back, because maybe this might make you feel a little bit better. When I talk about no 3-foot requirements or no distancing requirements, our schools just by design our students are spaced. The thing I guess I'm most excited about in terms of saying no social distancing is up until July 1st, nobody at school on July 1st, but I mean, up until then, the requirement for staff to remain 6 feet from their students was still the expectation. It wasn't happening. So it felt very.
And I think that's part of it is I've never been in this school. I have a child I center every day, and I have to have faith that the teachers and the administration and you are keeping them safe, right? Yep. And that's, I've never been in here because he's in kindergarten, right?
Yep.
You've never been able to come. I've never been his teacher. I suspect his teacher is the one who is left, so I don't even know that he has a teacher. And so it's like, what's that expectation going to be in that classroom to keep these kids safe?
So when I say that we don't have the social or physical distancing rules, I think we will probably still say things like, and actually Teresa's a great person to answer this. She's the librarian. So do you expect that when you bring the kids in for reading, you're going to pile them on top of each other like you used to? No, the reality is probably not. So we're going to, and Janice said one of the things we didn't talk about, because like I said, we're trying to recap 2 hours worth of conversation with the administrative team. Things that I don't know that will ever go away in our schools are the sanitation things and practices that we've started. Something as simple as having sanitizer in all the rooms. Most of our, walk up and down the halls, you see kids going out of the rooms, and they're getting squirted. They walk in, they get squirted.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's a respiratory virus though too, right? So like, if a child comes and has symptoms, that in a kindergarten classroom, and I have not seen how big the kindergarten classes are. When we know about the Delta variant, if there is a symptomatic child or even someone who has a viral load that isn't showing symptoms, the odds are that child could infect a good portion of that classroom.
Yep.
And my child will be wearing a mask, but I just know if other kids aren't, that's going to be really hard to enforce.
I'm really hoping, and again, this is a hope. It probably doesn't make you feel good as a parent to have a hope to rely on. But when we talk about mask option, we're not saying no mask. We're saying mask optional. I want to provide people like yourself and other parents who want the students to be masked. I want to encourage students to wear masks. I just want them to not feel like they have. You know, we were one of the places that went up and down in terms of, you know, really nobody can take a mask break for more than 5 minutes. And you have to, you know, it was really crazy. And I think that's the middle ground that I'm looking for. Is, our kids were amazing last year. If your son was here last year as a pre-K student?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a 4-year-old grandson. I was just astounded. I never would have guessed it prior to last year. They're wearing their masks. I wish Amelie was here, our student rep from the high school, to talk about how absolutely amazing, you know, all the students were, pre-K through 12, at wearing their masks and whatever. But I can tell you, we can all tell you that throughout the year there was sort of this grumbling of, are we going to have to do this for the rest of our lives? We're doing it. And actually, I have an email that I have to read from Amelie, who's in somewhere visiting in Germany.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
Somewhere in Europe.
So, and that's what she's saying. She's actually advocating that we come back with masks because she's like, you know, the most important thing is the safety of our students. And we do have to look at, we got Winthrop. So I talked about, as a superintendent's group, we met every week. It was hard, it wasn't hard for me, but I was very proud listening to other people talk. I was very proud of our community. Our community was so, the community of Winthrop was so amazing last year. I know the schools got some calls. I know they had some pushback, but I personally probably didn't get more than 5 phone calls the entire year, and probably 5 of them, the other 5 were from Joe, but that's a different story.
I know Joe.
Yeah, everybody knows Joe. But
I hope it's an open conversation. I don't want
absolutely
to monopolize tonight because you all need to be relate. The closing thoughts I would just have is we had a great school year. I agree, overly restrictive. In our pharmacies, there were people complaining like that person's taking a drink of water and took their mask off. That's not what I'm advocating for, is a police officer or school officer walking around. But I think it should be, I feel more comfortable if it were a little more strongly encouraged, and at the very least, if there were some thresholds about upon the first case in Winthrop, that wing will mask, or, you know, just things like that. Because we're sending our babies to you to keep safe, and I want to make sure that happens. So.
and that may be a reasonable consideration for us here if, because with the things we have in place, instead of having people quarantine, we might say they have to mask for X number of days.
We're taxed to the edge as parents. I think that there's a lot of parents here. I don't know how parents are going to deal with multiple quarantine or testing and still maintain our jobs. And
well, the reality is we're hoping, and Tim was speaking from some pretty crappy experiences last spring, where his children were made to stay home a number of times.
Days.
Wasn't even our fault, excuse me?
34 days.
And that's where,
How many?
34, not including Wednesdays for my daughter.
Yeah, my son was not that.
What grade was your child in? What grade?
First grade.
Yeah, there was a segment of our grade school got absolutely.
I'll pull her and figure it out if that's the case. I'm not going
Well,
back to that. My kids don't want to either.
But so that's the type of feedback that we got, which is, and we're like, I don't want to keep our kids. We're already concerned. Megan talked about the response we've had in terms of looking at regression and things that kids missed last year because of so much school. I mean, just that they weren't here every Wednesday, that's 20% of the entire school year, plus the additional time that they missed. So like that, and that's the balance that, you know, I hear what you're saying, maybe we've gone too far this way, we have to think about what
I think if our goal is to keep kids in school as much as possible, masks is a big piece of that goal.
And Dr. Shaw was crystal. The thing he kept saying that I loved was, I don't know how many times he said the goal is to get kids in school 5 days a week. And Maine already has led the nation. We had more kids, you know, it was hard for me to listen to the political figures in Washington talking about getting kids back to school, and thinking we're already exceeding those expectations. There are schools that kids didn't go to any school for months. And you know, we were here in Winthrop, and I said I really was very, and that's what I was saying, this community was amazing. We went with an 80% plan with 100% of the people who wanted to be in school, and other than the people who went 5 days a week, and quite frankly, I don't know how any teacher survived that whole year doing 5 days a week without any rest, any break or whatever.
We did, and then we did remote on top of it.
Yeah. And that explains all you need to know about Jan. No. So let me read this to the, I think an appropriate time to read this to the school committee and other people. Hello again, Mr. Hodgkin. Here are some of my thoughts about mask wearing in the fall. It is not very detailed because I didn't want to throw out any specific ideas until I could be present for the actual discussion. You don't have to read this out loud. I'm going to anyway. But if you could share the general message, I would very much appreciate it. As a representative of the high school students, I have to say that we all, of course, would love to be able to see our classmates and teachers' faces again, and that we hope that that could be reality this fall. However, the new variant and the CDC's new guidelines, I don't think it would be safe to have masks off for long periods of time in our school setting. It would be too difficult to distinguish between separated vaccinated and unvaccinated students. By the way, that was a big part of the conversation. I would have a very difficult time as a superintendent of school, and I was trying to approach it from, I don't want to punish people who choose not to be vaccinated. I'd like to give some sort of reward, some special considerations for people who are vaccinated, but then it becomes a split. So that was a big part of our conversation too. Even the students that are vaccinated can get sick and put students at risk that are not able to get the vaccine, but not to mention how many high school students are related to or have regular contact with grade school and middle school students. I hope to continue to work with the student leadership team and student council to incorporate more activities where we can work in groups and or can be outside or spread out enough to take off our masks. We can be more flexible this year and adjust our spacing, seating, sports, PE, and other such regulations as we learn new information. Last year was tough, but we got through it with our masks on to protect ourselves and others. There will certainly be frustration this year, but that cannot take away from the priority of keeping everyone safe. That's what Amelie had to say.
I just want to say again that all of those CDC recommendations were not based, we've never gotten any kind of different guidance because of the investment that we've made in the air filtration. So it's confusing to me that do we need to have the same, hold it to the same standard of those recommendations when we have this filtration system in place? Do you understand what I'm saying?
So should we be looking at a model where when kids are in the classroom, maybe they don't have to mask, but before they go into hallways or combined session areas?
That's what we talked about. If you remember, my original recommendation was that they are masked when they are on the buses. That's a given. That's a mandate from the feds. Right. But before I even found that out, that's what I was recommending. And that they are masked in the hallways. We don't need to have the one-way travel type of thing. They're masked in the hallways, and they're masked when they work in small groups. And then we had the conversation. You guys may remember that. You know, why would we mask them in small groups inside the classroom, which are virus free? Okay, maybe. So, you know, for me, I'm not as insistent. I just don't know. I don't have the same level of confidence in saying that what our hallways are. But if we are essentially of one cohort, and those cohorts are at some time, or actually a sizable percentage of their time, in rooms that are ventilated and have that system in place that kills the virus, that doesn't. I personally have got some mixed information. So if I'm passing in the hallway and I'm in the hallway for 5 minutes, which is very long, more like 2 or 3 minutes. Does that count? And I know at first, and I say that because at first it was 15 minutes at any one exposure. Then it was 15 minutes accumulated. But I don't know. It's a tough question. No, and the hard part is we're not getting really great answers around that.
There just aren't great answers right now scientifically for that information.
But a lot of what, the comment you just made sort of was, what I heard a lot of, and what little bit I heard last year is people are like, well, we're not going to do this again. If we can't guarantee that our school is going to be in place essentially 5 days a week, then we're going to find a different option. And I was like, okay. I know that's everybody's, and I do mean everybody. I have not heard a single superintendent or anybody at any level, they always lead with that we want our kids back in school 5 days a week. So how do we do that? And I would be 100% where you are, ma'am. If we
Can I have your name?
So because the
Thank you.
but and that was a big part of our conversation as administrative team. We've made some significant investments. We did research. We looked at a number of different options with how to make our rooms virus free. We did line of sight stuff. There's downside to that. We did all kinds of different things that they all had upside, and this is the only one that didn't really have any downside at all. My wife teaches in a system near us, and they were doing the fogging, which was disgusting, and not because of it. What we just you fog something and it settles somewhere, and it was gross. So this just really seemed, and I felt when we looked at this option last year during the summer, Dr. McConnell was on our committee. She took the information, she went back to further investigation from her Dr. Hat, and said this is really good. This is really, really good. So I feel very confident that that this is a really good device. So if we didn't have this, I think we'd still be looking at how do we get our kids back in school 5 days a week and make it as safe as possible. So that's why I was saying earlier that my hope that the school committee will adopt a plan that says mask optional and really encourage people to mask. And the kids who mask and the teachers who mask shouldn't feel like they have to be masked 100% of the time. And we should say, I was already thinking that even though we weren't going to require it in the hallway, that we say, why not? Just put your mask on. Walk through the hallway. It's really not that difficult. But at the end of the day, it really is about how do we get our kids back here 5 days a week and keep them young.
I've heard from a number of people, and I will tell you that I'm not in favor of an option. I want it to be mandatory that we're wearing masks. And I know at some point you can end that or you can phase it out, but I don't see any really good news about COVID and what's going on right now. The good news is that Maine is taking an aggressive approach to it. And we got to continue that aggressive approach. But I would join especially the parents of students who are in the grade school in saying that we've had great success with the students wearing the masks. Let's not back away from that. Let's continue that. Maybe you have to do something different or start something different at the middle school or at the high school, but I'm not sure you've got to start school that way. I think we start school with the masks on, and that we see what we can do as the school year progresses.
And are you meaning just the students or the teachers as well?
Everybody.
Any feeling on how that would go with the teachers?
There's a lot of mixed feelings. I have to say, in all honesty, I have not had a son just get married this weekend, so that's where my focus has been.
Yeah.
So I haven't reached out a ton in the last few weeks. I am going to be
Okay.
doing so.
That'll be good. Thanks.
Sure.
Anybody else? Any discussion tonight?
I've heard a lot of staff are done with the mask.
Yeah.
To do what? Staff are done with
It's
masks?
difficult.
But at the same time, they're gonna do, just like me, I'm a teacher in different districts, they say mask, I'm like, okay, I'll put it on, it'll be fine, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I'm doing totally different, but,
it's difficult.
yeah.
I think, Sue, what I would say is the comments that I've heard, in particular from vaccinated people, are why did I get the vaccine?
I can
if can't
understand
have the
that
mask on?"
sentiment very much. Yes, that makes total
I guess
sense.
too, it's like, I mean, if you just look at the, if you look around town, look at the people, I mean, these kids are together all the time, like,
Yes.
without any of the stuff we have in the schools, and we're just all the time, they're doing sports, the track's going on, the camps are going on, the soccer camp is going on, how many kids we have, record number, and then there's no masks, there's no social distancing, they're gonna be together anyway, and you put them into a controlled environment, you know, and masks on it, that's where I'm kind of.
And I would even add to that by saying we're gonna put them in a safer environment. You know, they didn't put any O2 devices in the rec program. Or there's obviously there's no place where you would gather them, so, you know, I don't know, and I've heard a lot of, you said, and that's why I wasn't sure what you said, people saying, we're done with, you know, with masks, we've kind of had enough. For me, it's still about, I still want to say, I would hate to have people say, I'm never wearing a mask again, because you know, my wife and I may wear masks in some places, God knows how long. I just, you know, you get used to it. I still wear I go into stores where it's not required, and I wear my mask, you know. Just, I don't want our kids to feel awkward or like they shouldn't wear them. And I certainly don't want to tell our parents that we're not making them wear them. We're not allowing them to wear the mask. That's what I was saying. When I was like, I would walk around when I'm touring the buildings, put my mask on.
So maybe there's a way to find a way to, I don't know, like the whole, you have spaces where everyone has to put a mask. I'm really not for the mask, but I'm trying to think of everyone's comfort level or sick population. Like you have the hallways, you have to have the kids with the masks on, and then there's a time when people are wearing masks, and the kids aren't feeling the pressure to take them off.
Yep.
So even if it's just a small few moments a day, there's structure that you have to wear a mask. This place isn't, this area is not, you know, 100% safe or whatever. That might make all the kids feel a little bit, you know, less pressure to not bring their mask to school. Or it also might help parents feel, okay, these are the areas that we're saying we're not 100%, they're going to keep it more safe. You know, make everybody feel more comfortable.
So it just reminded me, we talked about this with the administrative team, that I remember when this first was a blip on our radar here in the United States. I remember it was like January, might have even been December of the year before, where there was a family up, and I was in Holden at the time, that called and said, our children are not coming back to school because of this coronavirus that's whatever making its way to the United States. And I remember we all looked at each other and said, wow, that's extreme. And then as we started having, a conversation, there were measures that we were looking to take, and people thought we were overreacting then. And our response was, if we do all of this and it never happens, that was our goal. That's what we wanted to see happen. Well, we didn't do enough, and 200 million people later, the story is the story. So I know when I listen to the recommendations of the federal CDC and the state CDC and the DOE and all those people, they're saying, okay, we've done these things and they've been successful. So let's just keep doing it. It's like, okay, their goal is exactly the same. If the Delta variant, which most people are concerned is worse, never becomes an issue, never becomes a thing, then isn't that our goal? Isn't that what we want to do? So I get that, but I think we've also need to figure out why did we do the things, why we made the investments, and what's the, sort of the middle ground, safe place. I like the idea that when I'm thinking about it, this notion of if we have, you know, an area of our school that has a positive, not just a close contact, but a positive case, that we essentially treat that like a school quarantine. They're not staying home. They don't have to be away from school. We might just say they will have more restricted masking for X amount of time. Look for some guidance from whomever about doing that. But you know, I still think there's a strong expectation across our state. I can't speak for the country, that our schools reopen 5 days a week for 100% of our students who want to be here.
I think I would feel a lot more comfortable if high traffic areas were mask mandatory areas, so hallways, for example. And then you have the kids who would feel more comfortable keeping their mask on all the time.
Sure.
They transition from that high traffic area to a regular area, and they forget to take it off.
But they just don't.
But, you know, and nobody says anything.
Yeah.
And they don't feel, I mean, I'm the parent of a rising fifth grader who definitely would be the victim of some social, take your mask off, if there wasn't that requirement.
Yeah. We definitely need to, and I guess that's what I was saying in terms of trying to get some information out to the public now, to say, I want to encourage kids who are concerned or whatever to wear their masks, and we need to make sure that from a social acceptance standpoint, that's okay. It's got to be okay. We'll have teachers who will want to wear masks. It's got to be okay, you know. And
My question about requiring, say, in the halls, maybe not so much for the younger kids, but for middle school and high school, is this going to create a nightmare for the teachers because some of the kids aren't following the rules? Are they going to have to discipline them? What kind of situation is that going to create for the teachers and the principals?
I still think you create the expectation. You know, we're not going to. I don't want to say create an expectation and not follow up on it, but I think that and I'll be curious to see how that works, because I have to tell you, spending most of my career working with middle school kids, I would be very curious to see what the reaction is. And part of that might be that, okay, the middle school went through nobody out here is middle school kids, very well. The middle school went, I know, but so you'll know, that middle school went through an entire year of the kids stayed in the same room and the teachers moved around the whole day. Hated it. So I think there's enough of, oh my God, it could, you know, if they're asking us to wear a mask in a hall, this is just my prediction. First of all, it was amazing to me as a middle school person who loves middle schoolers, that the kids were so excited to be. I've never seen so many kids excited to be in school at the middle level. That was really true last year, and you could see that when you went up and spent any time there. And probably was true for you too, right, Jan, when you deal with that age group. And so the reality is we say, look guys, we need to follow these expectations, and not we'll have to go back to some of those other things like you don't change rooms. And for me, it should be a virtual zero issue, in that one of the things that I always did as a middle school principal was to say, when kids are passing in a hallway, you stand out in the hall. And I don't want kids being protected. So hallways, we don't know. And I don't know that there's a way to actually check them. So hallways really the only, buses where we're given, that's a no-brainer. We have no choice. And hallways.
I have a question on what happens if a student is tested positive on bus?
So that's our worst nightmare. Thank you for bringing that up.
I've done that twice. I have done.
Yeah. So that's our concern. That creates, and I'm sure Teresa will be asking me about that when we meet with the association. That creates our most challenging situation in terms of if we have to quarantine large numbers of students, we can do everything we can not to do that. That's, first of all, we're going to have, the buses are going to be assigned seating, which is one of the things that we did in the school last year, which allowed us to minimize the number of kids that had to quarantine. Except for that, there was, I mean, that group of that first grade, second grade was just, they just hit every possible bad thing that could happen to them. But anyway, they, we'll have to go through our due diligence in terms of seeing what the parameters are for them, and making some decisions about who's close contact or not. I'm comfortable that we do have some flexibility in terms of, say this student's tested positive and you sat, but in the exact same seat, so you're a close contact. That person may miss a few days. They could get a rapid and come back within a day. I think that would be okay. And then if they become symptomatic, they would go out and they would end up having a, whatever the other social called.
I think that's more reasonable than I said before. I was like, oh, whole bus.
Yeah.
Got 2 weeks.
Well, the situation, and I don't know if your child was involved in this, but the one that that Tim was frustrated with, the whole thing with the baseball, softball.
Oh, the baseball.
That
That's
one
where it
was.
started for my family.
Yep.
The baseball.
What's that?
It was baseball. But I want to say something about buses here is, I know that this is projection, what could happen. When I used to be a teacher, I actually taught at Red Lions in Hampton 10 years ago. So
Nice.
I worked at Ruby, by the way. Ruby, regardless, parents will pull kids off buses if they think the bus is the point where they're going to get smacked with some sort of quarantine or other sort of issue, which could lead to a logistical nightmare for drop-off and pickup.
Mm-hmm.
My wife and I are already planning on not even bothering putting our kids on the bus for that very reason. If it's a rapid test and maybe they get back on the bus, fine. But if the buses are the ones that are out of all of this equation, could lead to quarantines, it's going to be a nightmare with drop off and pick up. And we contributing to that, as far as my two children go, just the weight possibility.
Right.
I'm personally very glad what the superintendent is talking about in terms of, I'm pleased that we're trying to do something about the bus issue.
Yep.
Because in my situation, it is a grandson who, I don't know, it seems like he missed 3 months of school because he was always on a bus that somebody got the COVID, and they took the whole bus group and made him stay home for so long. And we're very concerned about him catching up for a year he practically lost. He's not in this school district, but I think you have to be practical about what we're doing and not blaming everybody for being on the bus to think that they're going to get it, because they don't get it that way. They got to have that contact.
So the reality is true, and I'm not trying to minimize what you said. I'm very sensitive to how much time our students missed. But I think about, for me, I think about, my wife teaches in Auburn. Auburn was 2 cohorts, so they saw they didn't have 100% of the kids. 100% were available to join a cohort, but they didn't. Same thing. They had a number of kids who just stayed home, did homeschooling and other things. So they saw those kids got to go to school in person 40% of the time for the entire school year. So even our students who missed 30 plus days, which is horrible, still were in school far more than a lot. And that was the majority of schools in the state of Maine that did that. The Windsors and the RSU 12s and the Oakland, Lisbon, Telstar. I mean, you really can pretty much count the number of people who did 5 days a week for the entire year. But so we were pretty fortunate for the most part.
That also, my wife and I have plenty of thoughts on the quality, but packets for Wednesday.
Yeah.
To us, that was not the same at all as far as instructional time. That pushes the number far higher in terms of loss-based instruction.
It does. And we don't need to get into a long conversation about this, because I heard a lot, and Joe directed some people to me with respect to that issue, and you said you were a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So the Wednesdays were never intended to be, they were intended to be what I would refer to as independent practice. They were not intended to be new learning, deeper learning, those types of things. So, I'm not trying to make excuses for that, but it was, as Madeline Hunter would have referred to it as independent learning or independent practice. And so I would still maintain that our kids got to be in front of their teacher 80% of the time, and that's significantly better than other people did. Having said that, I don't want to take away from what Megan said earlier. We still recognize that we have a substantial regression, and we're putting together pieces to sort of predict for, and it's very challenging to do that, how much kids have lost, and put in places where kids can have some additional support and get further behind. And we have our plan is that 2 years of additional teacher support, not just tech support, teacher support to help identify and address some of those issues about regression. So I think we have a pretty aggressive and solid plan to do that.
I think Winthrop did a fantastic job last year, and we only had to do remote learning in pre-K for a week, and it was the worst week I've ever had with my 4-year-olds. And I get 2 to 3 really great quality hours of time at night, and I'm sure you dealt with remote learning packets that it was a huge imposition on our family and ruined our family time. And the difference between 40% in Auburn is, again, they knew when their kids weren't going to be in school. We had to find childcare coverage and job coverage. So
yeah, no doubt. I'm not. If you hear me trying to defend that the burden that was placed upon our community members often overnight, I'm not trying to do that. I'm very sensitive to that. We tried to put together a structure that minimized that as much as possible, but that was the reality of what we all had to deal with. I'm very thankful for the response and the support of our community for the way they managed all those things. We knew. I put out a couple of different articles in the Advertiser that essentially say, I know how difficult this is for you all, and we really appreciate the support that people have given the schools. And historically, even though last year was my first year, you guys don't know this, and these guys know it a little bit, but I've lived in the area for over 30 years, and I have many friends that are either community members here, teachers here, would just know through a lot of things. And so Winthrop has a long-standing reputation of being an excellent community and excellent schools. And we put Megan White in the position she's in to sort of restore some of the glitter and shine that was on the academic side of this school system.
Quick question, PE classes, no restrictions, no space?
You're saying,
And
no, that's
music?
not ours, that's
Music as well? They can
music as
sing?
well. Yep.
Joel shared at our administrative retreat that right now, there's no regulations on sports either.
Yeah.
And so having some consistency in both of those programs, I think will be really helpful for our kiddos also.
That was a difficult, I won't speak for me, that was difficult last year when there was all of this upheaval in the community around sports. And it was really difficult for Joel because Joel wore that dual role last year of athletic director, promote athletics, dean of students, protect them all, and he really got torn up, and I got really bothered by the people who were like, we don't care, we're having sports. It's okay, we can't do all this other stuff, but we're gonna have our sports. It was really tough, and I know it's hard to believe now looking at me, but I was a 3-sport athlete in high school and whatever, but so I get it, I understand the role of it, the value of it, but it was really challenging. We made, I think, the best decisions we could around, understanding. One of the things that Megan talked about was we have the social emotional considerations for the kids who lost a lot last year from a social emotional standpoint. And, you know, we have to pay attention, and we have additional staff hired, an additional guidance counselor at the grade school, and an additional social worker, because it isn't just our students, it's going to be our families and whatever, so try and address some of their needs too. So I will draft a motion, including some of the feedback tonight. I appreciate that, and put that out there. So I'll add to the list that the administrative team came up with you shared tonight.
Okay. Anything else from anybody? No? New business. I will entertain a motion to suspend activity fees for the 2021-2022 school year pending further review.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion.
I just want to, in case, I mean, we really haven't had a lot of chance to talk about this. Last year when this came up, it seemed like a no-brainer because of everything we were dealing with last year. We didn't know if we were going to have activities at all, so it made no sense to do it this year, even though sports are going to, at least right now, the plan is for them to move forward and activities to move forward. I think there was enough of that conversation, and I will tell you, me personally, I'm not in favor. I don't like pay-for-play or activity fees for a number of reasons. And but I think things are enough still not decided, so that I'd like us to suspend this and then have the policy committee review this practice during the course of this year and come up with a move of decision moving forward.
What are the activity fees right now?
If Joel was here, he can tell you.
I think it's $100 a
Yeah,
year.
and then I think it used to be 100 for the year, and then they broke it out by season.
I
So
thought it was by season.
So if you had a child that played 3 sports, you'd pay the $100. But if they only played a fall and a spring sport, then you'd pay like $66.
There are also other fees for activities, for clubs and activities, so it wasn't just athletics.
Okay. Do we have money available to cover those?
That's one of if Joel was here, he'd tell you that's one of his frustrations. That money always got swept. It never got used in terms of.
Oh, okay.
It showed up in either in the audit, particularly when there's a deficit, it's helping to pay down the deficit, which is crazy because it wasn't much money, or it showed up in the budget as miscellaneous revenue. And that was one of the things he said. If we had and I still wouldn't support it, but if we were collecting activity fees and it was going into an account at the high school that the athletic department or activities groups could draw from to purchase things, then it would make some more sense. So ultimately what I would say is this: if this committee ultimately says we should have some sort of activity fee, then we also need to be really clear about what happens with that money.
Thank you.
And we do have other groups like the boosters that maybe people would rather contribute to them, and then they've done a lot to help us
Yes, they have.
over in the past, and free people up to maybe join that group and contribute to it that way.
It also, again, I don't want to go too far with it tonight, but over the years in my various roles, I've seen it creates sometimes some real hard feelings and unintended expectations. If your child is on a team and they don't play, that's always hard. If your child is on a team and they don't play and you paid $100 for them to be on those teams, it creates a different.
In the past, when we were collecting those activity fees, was there ever some kind of waiver for families who couldn't afford it?
Always, yeah. I can't give you a lot of specifics, but Joel did say that there was a hardship type of thing.
It was tied to free and reduced, just kind of plugging that as far as the need for turning in that paperwork and some of its applications.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Vote passes unanimously. I will entertain a motion to authorize and approve the execution and delivery of a master lease purchase agreement with Apple Inc. There's an attached Exhibit C.
So moved.
Second?
Moved and seconded, discussion.
Again, this is something you have to do in order for our schools to receive the Maine Laptop Initiative. We have an agreement, a lease purchase agreement with Apple, which is where we're getting our devices from, and we have to sign the lease purchase agreement for them. So it's a requirement. I showed it to you, right? It's in the copies in here, but the actual one that needs to be signed is still in my office. But the school committee, we have to show the minutes where the school committee has voted to accept the lease. Essentially, you're accepting the laptops from middle school, from the Maine Laptop Initiative.
Could I just ask a question? Sure. In the example that you've given, there is a statement that says that, you know, you could be charged up to $159,000. Is that basically what we spend for the total lease?
That's the lease, correct. Not each year, that's the total lease.
Okay, so if they're lasting 3 years, that's
4 years.
4 years. Good.
Any other questions? All right, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Vote passes unanimously. Any other public comments that anybody would like to make?
So please spread the word. I know next time we'll have the vote, so it's a little bit unusual, but I really like the way the school committee runs these meetings, even though I wish there were more people. But in some boards, in places where I've been, public can only speak during public comments. I think that's absurd. The only expectation that I ever have with these guys is that if there's an issue, essentially the school committee kind of gets to say their piece first, and then it should be an opportunity for people in the public to be a part of the conversation. But some people take very seriously the notion that school committee meetings are not really public. They're not public meetings. They are meetings held in public. Figure that out. But that's how. So they're like, we do our work in public so you can see us. We don't really see you, but you see us. To me, that's bad practice. So I really appreciate the comments and you being here. And this is a pretty big decision. So hopefully next time more people show up and be a part of weighing in. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Okay, we can move on to school committee comments. Jim?
I don't have a real lot. I just wanted to mention that, I can't remember who posted a picture of the grade school gym after it got resurfaced. But it was great to see, and I know a lot of work's getting done in these buildings throughout the summer, so a huge shout out to maintenance and admins. With your meeting, I know that you guys have been working hard this summer, so I just really appreciate, school doesn't stop in June and start in August or September. So thank you to everyone that's doing that.
Timothy?
This Saturday, Massapequa High School, we have 21 Winthrop youth from age 7 to 14 that qualify for states.
Awesome. Yay.
So we have one to show.
Excellent.
Is states this weekend?
Massapequa High School.
It's at Massapequa, but you went to Messalonskee to qualify?
No, Miranda. Group state.
Oh, that's good.
7 to 14.
15 communities came to Reedfield.
That's fantastic.
But ages 7, 14, 21 qualified.
Nice.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Are your children a part of that too? Is that?
Of course.
Proud of that.
Kelly?
I don't really have anything to add.
Okay. Joe?
I would tell you that, I don't know what it is, but it seemed like this year is one of the more busy off-school, in-school activities type of summers that we've had in recent memory. And that's always good because I've seen some things just not be as popular and as much participation, kind of a lull that we took place for about a decade or so. Because my kids always did everything, if you remember. But I think there's a strong enthusiasm out there for working with the schools and working with the teachers, the other coaches and everything that is great. It's just wonderful. So.
When you say very busy, you mean in terms of kids being involved and stuff?
Yeah, kids being involved, parents are involved too. I mean, I just go by the bottom of the high school road, and of course, Jana lives down that area, the traffic is like going back and forth all the time, which is great, that's good.
Well, I know I spent my whole summer going to sporting events with 2 high schoolers, but I just like to echo what everybody else said too. And it's just, I just think this is a great community. I feel like we work well together on all levels, and I really appreciate that. So now I would like to I will entertain a motion to enter into executive session regarding personnel pursuant 1 MRSA 4056A.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion?
Don't anticipate any action coming out of executive session.
Okay.